Every empire, every island, every nation, all of them are deep in the red. The United States carries more than $38 trillion in debt, the highest figure in its entire history. The European Union owes about $14 trillion. Japan, nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich kingdoms like Saudi Arabia and exporting giants like Germany and China are buried in numbers written in red. But if everyone owes money, who exactly is owed? Who sits at the other end of humanity's balance sheet? This isn't just a question of economics. It is a mirror held up to civilization itself. Because debt isn't merely a burden. It asks the invisible architecture holding our entire world together. Today, global debt has surpassed $315 trillion, more than 3 times the size of the entire global economy. Yet that number doesn't truly exist. It isn't printed in gold. It isn't stored in vaults. It lives inside ledgers, on servers, and across millions of screens, sustained by one fragile thing: belief. Belief that a promise made today will still matter tomorrow. Our economy runs on faith, not the kind you find in temples, but the silent, daily faith that the system will not collapse. Every paycheck, every mortgage, every government budget is a whispered prayer to the machine. Keep turning. We have built a civilization on credit and on tomorrow-esque money, and we call it prosperity. To understand how this grand illusion began, we have to go back over 3 centuries, not to Wall Street, but to a battlefield. In 1694, England was at war with France, and its gold reserves were nearly gone. Soldiers were unpaid. Defeat loomed. Desperation was rising. So the king turned to merchants and bankers. They offered him gold, but in exchange for something entirely new, a promise backed by future taxes and interest. From that deal, the Bank of England was born. For the very first time, a government could spend money it didn't yet have. And the creditors? They received something more valuable than gold, a government promise that could be traded like treasure. That promise became the bond, the seed of modern finance. France copied it. The Netherlands perfected it. The young United States used it to fund its revolution and its westward expansion. Debt, once a mark of weakness, became a symbol of credibility. To borrow was to rule. Empires once conquered land for gold. Now they issued paper for interest. The battlefield had become the balance sheet. Centuries later, that system became the most powerful engine on earth. Every country borrows, every citizen pays, every institution lends, and every single dollar in existence is someone else's debt. Global borrowing now rises by $1 trillion every 100 days, but almost no one stops to ask, to whom? Let's start with the United States, the center of this web. Of its $38 trillion in debt, about half is publicly traded. 2/3 of those bonds are held by American institutions: banks, pension funds, insurers, and the Federal Reserve itself. The rest, about $9 trillion, is held abroad by countries like Japan, China, the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, and Belgium. But here, here's a surprise. China's share is only about 2% of the total. The truth is, most of America's debt is owed to itself. The Treasury issues bonds, banks and funds buy them. The Fed buys them back, creating new dollars out of thin air. Taxpayers fund the interest, which then flows back into our own retirement accounts and domestic funds. It's a financial mirror, a closed circuit reflecting itself. And that mirror extends across the entire world. Japan lends to the US by buying treasury bonds. The US lends to Europe through the International Monetary Fund. Europe then lends to developing nations through the World Bank. And those same nations lend money right back by depositing their reserves in Western bonds. It's a global game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. The game can never stop, because if one major player drops it, the whole illusion collapses. Behind these promises stand the hidden kings of credit. Vast networks of hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks, all managing tens of trillions of dollars. They decide who can borrow cheaply, who has to pay more, and who gets cut off entirely. When their confidence cracks, currencies fall, governments collapse, and entire economies are rewritten overnight. Democracy decides who governs, but the markets decide who survives. Towering above them all are the central banks, the modern high priests of money. They don't just regulate debt, they manufacture it. When the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, or others buy bonds, they create new money in the process. Every liability on one balance sheet becomes an asset on another. Every dollar in your pocket represents debt somewhere else in the system. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every note, every digital dollar carries an invisible promise. I owe you. For decades, this collective faith has kept the machine alive. As long as investors believed governments would pay the interest, even if they never paid back the principal, the system kept turning. But faith is fragile. In Greece in 2010, that faith cracked. The debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. The IMF stepped in with austerity, higher taxes, fewer jobs, and a despair that lasted a generation. In Argentina, default followed default until debt itself became a national curse. In Sri Lanka, when the government ran out of dollars, fuel vanished and the streets burned. Each collapse revealed the same truth. When trust fails, the creditors finally show their faces. They are the IMF, the rating agencies, and anonymous funds whose decisions can shape the fate of entire nations. And when the dust settles, the same logic begins all over again. Old debt is repackaged under new names because this system was never designed to end. It was designed to renew itself. Governments don't actually plan to pay off their debts. They refinance them forever. Economists call this rolling over. The interest becomes the product. The rent becomes the price of stability. The global economy depends on that rent the way a shark depends on movement. If it stops swimming, it dies. The US will never pay off its $38 trillion. Japan will keep rolling its debt for decades to come, now at more than 250% of its GDP. And investors prefer it that way because government debt is considered the safest asset in existence. A US Treasury bond isn't just a liability, it's collateral. It's the foundation of the entire global market. If Washington paid off every dollar it owed tomorrow, the world economy would collapse. Dollars would vanish, deflation would spread like a plague, and trade would freeze. So governments do the opposite. They issue more debt. Not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt has become the heartbeat of capitalism. That SY, when politicians promise to balance the budget or pay down the debt, they're not offering you the truth. They're offering comfort. The goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it believable. As long as people and markets believe in the promise, the system survives. The illusion is beautiful because it feels real. But this belief isn't shared equally. Debt flows upward, from workers to investors, from nations to institutions. Each interest payment widens the gap between those who owe and those who own. Inequality and debt rise together like two vines climbing the same tower. Creditors aren't villains, and debtors aren't victims. They are two sides of the same coin, bound by the same promise that fuels the world while quietly draining it. The real danger comes when the engine starts to run out of fuel, when new loans can no longer feed the old promises. Then the illusion fades, and the question becomes personal. Who is the creditor? Who really owns the world's money? At the top of the pyramid, there's no single villain. It's not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them, and in a sense, it's us. Because the modern financial system has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has vanished. Debt once meant servitude. Today it means balance. A fragile equilibrium held together entirely by trust. But if that trust ever breaks, the illusion ends. And we'll all remember what debt truly is, a promise that cannot be kept forever. So if every country is in debt, who owns the world's money? Maybe the answer is simple. No one does. Because what we call money is not wealth. It's faith. Faith in the greatest illusion ever engineered. The $315 trillion illusion. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the systems that run our world.